the most important factor in the top nations, take the top 20 nations, in their world ranking is going to be how they perform at the World Cup and the Olympic Games. So any coach or any high performance director has to have that at the forefront of their mind. To be honest, for them, the world ranking system and gaining some world ranking points should be secondary or tertiary to developing their team, developing their players.
Welcome to Studio Hockey. Jon Wyatt is the sports director for the FIH and our guest today. We asked him to tell us a little bit about his hockey background and responsibilities within the FIH.
Okay, thanks, Hans. Hockey. I started playing hockey when I was 18 months old, and I have played hockey for the last 45 and a half years. It is the sport that my father played and therefore introduced me to it. And I was fortunate enough to travel all around the world. I played for Great Britain and England for 8 years, 2 Olympic and World Cup cycles, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And for me, it's the greatest sport. When I finished playing internationally, indeed. When I finished playing hockey internationally, unfortunately, I needed to earn a living. And at that time, this is in the early 2000s, working in hockey wasn't really an option. So I stayed within sports. I had spent 6 years working for Accenture, the management consultancy, while I was playing hockey. So I had an interest in business, but also in the business of sport. So I spent 15 years working for a sports marketing agency in London, but working on global campaigns. Was lucky enough to work on campaigns around the Olympic Games, around various Rugby World Cup, around the English Premier League. So lots of different sports for lots of different brands. And I ended up running that agency, 50 or 60 people in London. And then when I came in and was looking for a new challenge, a change, a year or so ago, an old playing colleague of mine, David Lucas, who's my predecessor in this role, who I'd kept in touch with, he announced that he was moving to the IOC. So an opportunity came up here at the FIH, and the chance to work in hockey, to bring some experience from outside of hockey and bring it into the sport that I know and love and had continued to play was too much to pass up. So we moved the family out here. It's very nearly a year ago now. I started at the beginning of April. And my responsibilities are primarily for everything that happens on the field of play. So athletes, officials, the rules, the regulations, the playing surface, the sticks, the equipment. And I work very, very closely with Mike Joyce, the development director, on how we grow the game of hockey globally. So my responsibilities, I guess, go from top to bottom, from the elite game all the way down through to grassroots and the development of the game. As sport director, a number of the topics we're going to discuss today come under my remit.
So when you're talking hockey with a couple of hockey enthusiasts, and some might even say hockey nerds, you're in the rush of talking for hours and hours, but we don't have that time. Because we have so many innovations, and some are new and exciting, and sometimes they're annoying. But today, let's limit the talk to 4 topics. So we will not be talking about a new anti-doping program, or that has been agreed to by the FIH. But we will also not be talking about the progress into developing dry artificial turf before 2024. Instead of today's water-based pitches. We will not be talking about gender equality in our sport. We will also not be talking about the launch of the FIH Pro League. A success according to some, a disaster according to some others. We will not be talking about what I feel a little bit poor launch of the FIH.live platform and difficulties in getting hockey on TV around the world. But if you're interested in any of these topics, make sure that you subscribe to our podcast, because these will be addressed in future podcasts. But so for today, we will limit ourselves to 4 topics. Main topic for me today will be the new global ranking, which we're going to launch anytime soon. And normally, I think, if I read the press release right, should be launched by January of 2020 into the public, I guess. Changes in the qualification process towards World Cup qualification or Olympic qualification. Third topic is I read that you're going to make the continental championships more important. But the fourth topic, and let's start with that one, is the FIH series. So we've been through recently the death of the Champions Trophy, the Champions Challenge, the Hockey World League, and now its successor, the FIH series. We're all still a little bit in mourning for the demise of the Champions Trophy, which has been a legendary event for all these years. Even though these last couple of years it has lost most of its glory due to some poor choices. But it gets replaced by the new FIH Pro League, which at least has the potential to build a legendary reputation for itself as well. The idea behind the Hockey World League and its successor, the FIH Series, was to provide a second pathway for lower-ranked nations to glory and to the ultimate dream of participating in a World Cup or the Olympics. Noble idea, according to me, even though the execution of the idea with the initial Hockey World League was not all that. It was way too complicated and with poor marketing, so few really understood its purpose. However, the new FIH series was a big improvement, simplified and still serving the same purpose. And the idea behind of all this was a valid one. It worked. So last summer we all witnessed the fairy tale of the Irish women, who were not even considered an outsider for the Women's World Cup in London, but they qualified through fighting through the Hockey World League. They fought their way to the final, and yeah, that's the stuff that dreams are made of. It's the stuff why we all love sports. So Jon, why kill the FIH series?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Ernst, and giving us your view on some of the changes that have been made.
It is obviously my view. Years. Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, and all views are valid, and obviously our role as the FIH is to take into consideration all of those views. But probably the most important views are those of the athletes and our members, the national associations. Mm-hmm. And as you've said, both the World League and the Hockey Series, or the FIH Series as it has become, was introduced in order to provide opportunities for all nations to participate. We want to encourage, one of our obvious aims is to encourage participation between international teams, to gain world ranking points. Mm-hmm. Because often world ranking points allows them to unlock funding at a local level or through their government or through their sponsors or their national Olympic committees. And then ultimately to qualify and then have the chance to qualify, as you say, live the dream, to participate in the World Cup and the Olympic Games. And those rationale are still as valid today as they has ever been. Mm-hmm. And they were certainly the intention behind the launching of those, the predecessors, if you like, to where we've got to now. The unintended consequences, which often only transpire when you roll something like this out, are what we have been listening to for the year since I've been with the FIH. And what we have discovered that where we were trying to provide opportunity, we've actually caused challenge and conflict for particularly our smaller national associations, mm-hmm. because they simply are unable to fund and to afford to go to more than one competition on an annual basis. It's mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's the reality of smaller nations. Mm-hmm. And the way that the series open and now the series finals fall, they actually clash with existing tournaments that happen at a continental level. So, as you know, in the odd years, we have the continental championships. Well, that's the same cycle now as this year as the FIH series finals will be happening. Mm-hmm. And equally in the even years, every one of our 5 continental federations hosts various invitational or lower level, if you like, continental tournaments for their national associations. And what the national associations have told us is that they were having to choose between those two tournaments. They were having to choose between going to a continental federation organised tournament or go to an FIH organised tournament. And because the world ranking system, which as you, I'm sure, understand in great detail, is a tournament-based system, And therefore, the only way of gaining world ranking points is to attend FIH ranking tournaments. The continental federations started to suffer. And there was even one example last year where a tournament had to get cancelled because there were no teams. Of the 12 teams who were invited to participate, the lower ranked teams in this particular continent, yes, none of them went, and they all prioritized the FIH Series Open over that. Mm-hmm. So whilst we were trying to provide opportunity to participate, in effect, we were actually creating a conflict, and a conflict between ourselves and our continental federations, which is basically like brothers and sisters in a family. Right? I mean, we all have the same purpose to grow and develop hockey around the world. So it is not a case for me of, to use your word, killing the series or killing the World League. This is more about listening to our members, listening to our athletes, and providing opportunities that continue to allow them to participate, encourage participation, both in events, but also in individual test matches and smaller tournaments, where, and we'll come on to this, but the reason why we've announced these 3-4 things at the same time is that they are all interlinked. Yes. Because if the only way of gaining world ranking points, for example, is to participate in an FIH tournament, then clearly we have to provide FIH tournaments in order for teams to earn world ranking points. Well, that's going to change. And all test matches, all capped test matches, official test matches, there will now be world ranking points available from the beginning of next year. So actually, by freeing up the calendar, we're doing two things. One, we are giving oxygen and giving life to our continental federation events. Mm-hmm. And secondly, we're freeing up the calendar so that national associations can organize their own international tours, matches, little tournaments, whereby they can participate, play against other nations. They can gain world ranking points, and ultimately that can lead to the growth of the game in their nation, and also the qualification through to World Cups and Olympic Games. And to come on to the final point, and I'm sure you'll have follow-up questions, but the way that we are enhancing the importance of the continental championships, as we've announced, is that the qualification to World Cup and to Olympic Games and to the qualification events for those big tournaments will now happen through the placings that you end up in a continental championships. So currently, today, you have to win the continental championships for the continental championships to allow you to qualify for an Olympic Games or a World Cup. In the future, it'll be the winner will continue to get through, but there will also be places in the qualification events which will again come through that continental championship final position, if you like. Okay. So it might be that the top 3 teams actually coming in the top 3 becomes very important. You could win it and go straight through, or you come second or third and you go through to the continental to the qualification event. Yeah. So it raises the profile and the importance of the continental championships. But therefore, what we've said to our continental federations, and we've had a number of meetings with them about this, they all have to have qualification events to get to their continental championships that are open to all. So every national association around the world has to be able to be part of the road to the next Olympic Games or the next World Cup.
What I get at from previous talks is that namely the IOC asks for federations to have at least 2 pathways to go to the Olympics. So one is obviously, well, apart from being the organizing country, one is becoming the continental championship, winning the continental championship. The previous one was qualifying through tournaments like this World League or the FIH series. So
yes.
Will they still accept this? Okay, the qualifiers that we're going to organize as the second pathway to the Olympics. Okay. Exactly,
and being very honest, some of the absolute final detail of this, and exactly how many places are going to come through the Continental Championship, and exactly how the qualification events will happen, which will be the first set of this will be in 2021 ahead of the 2022 World Cup.
Yeah.
So the first Olympic qualification will be in 2023 ahead of 2024.
Yeah.
So some of that detail we haven't announced yet. You'll have noticed that.
Yeah.
And that we're continuing to finalise and to take through the processes that it needs to go through and all the stakeholders that I'm sure you'd appreciate.
Yeah.
But the principle is that there will be greater emphasis placed on the continental events, both from a qualification point of view at the very, very bottom of the pyramid, if you like, all the way up through the championships and all the way up to the Olympic and World Cup.
So to sum up, basically it means that the places that are reserved for the qualifiers for an Olympics or the qualifiers for a World Cup, now instead of coming from the FIH series events, they are now coming from the continentals.
So a good number will come from the continentals. Yeah. Then there will be some that may come through the world rankings. That's the detail, the fine detail that we are just confirming with our stakeholders at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. So but that basically answers a lot of the questions already. The one that is most interesting to me is then obviously where are we going with the global ranking?
Yes.
I'm sure that you've seen that I've been pretty vocal in opposing the current global ranking, which I consider to be really unfair. So I'm really happy that there's going to be a change. I like the idea that we're going to do match-based instead of tournament-based. But can you explain already a little bit more in detail which direction we are going?
Of course. So, and my starting point is that the current tournament-based system, whilst it has a number of flaws, not least it is incredibly complicated and difficult to understand. Yeah. It also has, in my view, a little too much subjectivity around the calculations, the continental weightings for one continent over another. The logic is sound, but there is an element of subjectivity, and I think when it comes to ranking systems, the more clear and objective you can be, the fairer it is for everybody. Mm-hmm. That said, I don't think anyone would argue too strongly that for the top probably 15 to 20 nations in the world, it's pretty accurate, the current system. You know, the teams in the top, there may be obviously
a little difference, but
one up, one down, but there's, it's not like when we have a World Cup or Olympic Games, we suddenly have it's sport, right? So we want to have some upsets. We want to have some lower ranked nations beating some higher ranked nations. Mm-hmm. But I don't think anyone looks at the current ranking system for that top 15 to 20 and says it's vastly wrong. However, when you get below that, the biggest issue with the current system is that because it's only in FIH tournaments where you can win ranking points, and if you're at a lower level in the ranking system, you might only enter one rankings tournament every 2 years, or in some cases every 4 years. The opportunity to earn ranking points is very, very small. Yeah. And we've looked at the numbers, and we now have a fantastic tournament management system which allows us to capture every single result in every official test match, male and female, anywhere in the world. Yeah. It captures between 12 and 1,300 matches every year. And at the moment, the current system only uses about 20% of those test matches, which happen to be in FIH tournaments, to calculate the world ranking. So there's a load of hockey going on that is not counting towards world ranking. So that's where we've started. We've then looked at many other team sports that we think are relevant, including rugby, basketball, football, and a number of others. And most of them now use a match-based system. Not to say that because they're doing it, we should do it, but there seems to be a body of evidence that it's a fair and equitable system. Yes. So we have developed an algorithm over the last 6 months with, I have to say, although I do enjoy maths, I have some far more intelligent mathematicians and IT people within the FIH. And we have developed an algorithm that we have now tested, and we're using the period from the end of the Rio Olympic Games, so October 2016, until the 1st of January this year, so 2.5 years of results, over 2,500, nearly 3,000 match results, to test this algorithm, to test the system that we think will result in a much fairer system. The really good news is it means that we have, just using that model, it increases the number of nations that are ranked, because there are teams out there who are playing each other, playing other international matches, but they're not playing in tournaments. So that's a very positive thing, because even if you're ranked in 85th in the world, if you can demonstrate improvement, then you have a chance of gaining and unlocking some funding. Exactly. So where we are with the system is we have enough confidence in the new system and the new algorithm to have announced, as you saw last week, to present it. I presented it to the executive board. I also took all of the Continental Federation CEOs through it. And there is unanimous agreement a match-based system is the right way to go. The model at the moment, I'd say, is probably about 90% of the way there. So what we are doing is we are going to continue to test slightly different tweaks to the algorithm based on the number of points maybe you could give to it for a win versus a draw, or the importance of a match in the World Cup versus a match in a test match or in a Four Nations tournament, because the system takes into account how important each match is. So we can. There are a number of levers that we can use to see what gives out what we believe to be the best and fairest result. The system we have at the moment, as I say, we reckon is probably about 90% right. We're going to continue to test that system on the historical results. We're also going to, and have started, looking at every result as it happens this year and run the system, and probably run 2 or 3 different versions of the system in the background for 2019, such that when we get to the end of this year, we're really confident that all the little anomalies, all of the what happens ifs that, already in conversations people are raising, well, if that was the case, what happens if this happens? What is that fair? Is not fair? So, will we get it 100% right? Of course not. Will we get it as close as we can? We will. And then the aim will be to then start that system from January the 1st, 2020. The reason for that date is that by that point, the qualification for Tokyo has been completed. And all of the pools, which are based on the world ranking system, have also been decided. So we won't be influencing the current 4-year cycle. It would be wrong to change any qualification system or any ranking system during the Olympic cycle. But actually, we can run it from the 1st of January 2020, which means that by the end of Tokyo, it's actually in a pretty good place. And we then use that system for our qualification, for our pools, etc., from the end of 2020 onwards. So the World Cup in 2022 will be using that system, as will Olympic Games in 2024. Okay,
good. Okay, can you shed some light already on the points, which way are they given through matches, or?
Yes, so the principles I can talk you through. So the principles are the number of points on any match is determined by 3 factors. It is determined by the result of the match, obviously. It's determined by the difference in world ranking going into the match. Okay, so obviously you should get more points if you beat a team who's ranked above you, and equally makes sense. And finally, the importance of the match. So is the match the World Cup final, or is the match a test series between 2 nations? Because clearly, whilst we want to encourage participation in matches, we also want to encourage participation in tournaments. And it's right that we should recognise good performance in tournaments above good performance in individual matches. The final point then is that it is a net zero system. And again, this is the system used in many other sports. So if 2 teams play each other, if one team gains 20 points, the other team loses 20 points. So if a lower ranked team beats a higher ranked team, then the lower ranked team gains more points, and the higher ranked team loses more points than if the result was the other way around, where the higher ranked team won the match. And in that case, they should win it. It's the expected outcome. Therefore, they would gain some points because they win, but a small number of points. And the team who loses, they lose points, but only a small number of points. Because again, we don't want to discourage lower ranked teams from playing against higher ranked teams, obviously, because that's how you improve and develop.
Makes sense. So I will be very happy to watch this in action. You've seen the changed world ranking already. Did you notice a couple of discrepancies or?
So it's very interesting when it comes to assessing a new model.
Yeah.
So a few things happen. One is there are winners and losers always. There's certainly some people move up a bit and some people move down. So you have to sort of somehow discount those individual scenarios. The second thing is, how do you determine whether a world ranking is better or worse than one model being better or worse than another model? Because it's not just does it replicate the current system? Mm-hmm. Because if it replicated the current system, then why are we changing the system?
Absolutely.
So then you have to look at results that have happened between when teams who played against each other from different continents, because that's really the time when you realize most of the rankings within a continent are pretty accurate correct. Because they're playing against each other all the time. Yeah. It's when you have this team from Pan America plays a team from Asia. It doesn't happen very often. And the problem with sport is that the better team doesn't always win.
True.
And so you don't always get the higher ranked team beating the lower ranked team. So working out exactly whether the system is good, bad, or indifferent is quite a challenge in itself. What we have found is that the top 15 or 20 teams, the order of the teams changes a bit in the current model, but the teams who make up that top 15, 20 are pretty much
the same.
The same teams, which is probably it's about right. If a team who played in the World Cup plays a team who didn't play in the World Cup, most times that team would win. Not always. Where it's very different, where it has a much bigger impact, is the lower down the table you get, because you're now comparing a system where a team may have earned some world ranking points from playing in a tournament once in 4 years, when actually they've played 35 test matches over the course of that 4-year period. So some again will go up significantly and some will go down significantly. And what we need to do is encourage the competition and participation without discouraging teams who may be at the very, very bottom end, who just desperately want to play, and that's the only way they're going to improve. So we don't want to penalise them from participating.
Absolutely. So I get absolutely the logic behind what you're telling here. For the lower ranked teams, is they need more matches and possibilities to gain world ranking points. And that's only beneficial for them, on field, but also off field with government grants and stuff like that.
Sure.
I guess that most of these countries will benefit from playing a lot of more games, even if it's against the neighboring countries and not always the stronger countries. But the competition will make them stronger and will make them give them the possibility to rise in the ranking. So I think that's a really good thing. But when you look at especially at the top 10 or top 15 nations, there are some differences between hockey philosophy based upon on the continent, and you've got a couple of countries with a strong domestic league, and a couple of countries who focus almost entirely on their national team. How will you then compensate? For instance, I don't want to pick on India, but let's take India and say, okay, they don't have the really strong domestic league competition. They focus almost for 90 or 100% on their national team. They're going to play a lot of tournaments, and so have a possibility of gaining a lot of points. And then you take a country like Germany, or England, or Holland, or Belgium, who have a really strong domestic league, where there is already a lot of fighting going on between clubs who are paying players and national teams, who want obviously the best preparations to go into the big tournaments. So they will have less opportunity to play a lot of tournaments. They will probably be a little bit the privileged ones, so they will probably be playing the good European Cups and the World Cups, and so they will have a little bit of an advantage in participating in those and gaining more points from that. But probably will have less time to be doing Four Nations or other kinds of invitational tournaments where you can gain world ranking points in this system.
Sure.
Is there a way that you're going to balance that out, or is that just fact of life and Europe will have to deal with it?
No, they are very good points, and we discussed these at length. I think the two, well, there are a number of points, but purely by participating doesn't guarantee you gaining points. Is the first point. So, yes, if you play 10 games, you have the opportunity to win points in those. You also have the opportunity to lose points in those 10 games. So there's a risk reward there. But look, we want to encourage participation. If this means that some teams who are able to participate in many more competitions, then that's a good thing. The second thing is that the weighting that is applied to playing in if you like, a more official tournament versus a test match or a Four Nations tournament means that actually the number of points you could gain from playing smaller tournaments against a small number of teams is significantly less than doing well in a World Cup, for example. So, what is not possible to model, but is possible to have conversations with people, which is what we've done and are doing, is how this will change the philosophy of coaches and performance directors in setting their national team program.
Yes.
Because all we can currently model on is a behavior which is based on tournament-based world ranking system, right? So it isn't actually possible to do this through a mathematical model. What it is possible to do is go and speak to people and speak to coaches and say, well, explain the model, and then say, what might you do? Would you go and play 3 friendlies against your local neighbour because you thought you had a chance to do this? How would it impact on that? The most important factor in the top nations, take the top 20 nations, in their world ranking is going to be how they perform at the World Cup and the Olympic Games. So any coach or any high performance director has to have that at the forefront of their mind. To be honest, for them, the world ranking system and gaining some world ranking points should be secondary or tertiary to developing their team, developing their players. There was an example in football, actually, a number of years ago, where I think it was Poland qualified for a World Cup, and their world ranking was such that they were going to be seeded in one of the pools. They didn't play any international matches between then and the seeding date, so that they maintained that seeding. They arrived in the World Cup undercooked, and they performed really badly. So I certainly hope and expect that our coaches and our performance directors, their fundamental aim is going to be about performance at those major events. That's where they get their funding. That's where they get their NOC funding, their government funding. And ultimately, that's where they're going to gain most world ranking points, is by performing well at the big tournaments. So they're good points. The question has been raised similar to that which you've raised, which is around, does it advantage richer nations versus poorer nations because they can play more? But that's why the net zero point system works, because yes, you could play more, but you might lose more as well. So it's not necessarily only a positive.
Well, you can choose who you play, of course, but yeah.
You could, but if you play teams who are lower ranked than you win even smaller number of points. You know?
No, agreed.
But yeah, look, I'm also very aware, and I remember it from my playing days. If there is a way of a coach or a player or finding a loophole in a system, they'll find it, and we'll have to develop that over the years and close those loopholes as we find them. But we're finding many in our modelling, and we're confident we're going to be in a good place come the end of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Will there be because we talked about there's going to be a higher importance for continental championships in the pathway to Paris 2024 and subsequent World Cups and Olympic Games. But at the moment, one of my biggest criticisms towards the current global ranking system is that there is way too much importance in points given based upon continental championships. For instance, if New Zealand beats Papua New Guinea in the Oceanic Championship, they gain the same points as Holland winning a silver medal at the World Cup. Almost the same points. 650 to 630, something like that. So that's very comparable. That doesn't make sense. Will that be different in the new system? So where countries like Argentina, basically almost certain to be a Pan Am champion, 3 out of 4 events, they gain 3 out of 4. They gain the same amount of points as a current Olympic champion or a current world champion. where there are other nations, Asia, Europe, who have a lot more competition going on in the continentals.
Yeah.
Is this something that's going to be built?
It's exactly the reason for moving to a match-based rather than a tournament-based system. And you could also have said Champions Trophy, which is an invitational tournament. Why are there world ranking points on Champions Trophy? Pro League was not purely around performance on pitch. It was there were other reasons for choosing the team. So all of that is exactly why we're moving away from tournament-based to make it more match-based. So in terms of the world ranking system, that subjectivity between continents and between invitational events and non-invitational events is exactly what we're trying to remove. What we are, however, trying to do is place a greater importance on performance in continental championships in terms of qualification or access to qualification tournaments, which has gone down obviously very well with our continental federations.
Okay. Can you name one country who was a big surprise in the new world ranking?
No.
No.
It's not a new world ranking yet. It's still a model.
It's still a model. I get that.
I hope so. And look, we won't get everything right.
No.
But we're always trying to get things as right as we possibly can. So thank you for your continued interest and support in hockey, and look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to Studio Hockey. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And as always, enjoy your hockey. Bye bye.